Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about how to construct boss behavior. Alternatively, it could be any kind of enemy behavior in a video game, but we're just going to talk about how to construct behaviors in the first place. Now, I've got this already built, you know, AI, creature, or whatever, enemy. So I won't be going into all this today, but I will be covering the actual important part, which is how to construct and record behaviors for it. This turns on the AI, which basically just changes the label. As you can see here, it's labeled foe. It does a lot of other things, but those aren't really important to this. The main thing that's important is in here. The AI behaviors. These are what they look like, and they are created using this thing here, record possession, which when triggered allows you to possess the puppet and record an action with it. I'm gonna turn this off briefly just to allow us to record and give a demonstration. Oh, by the way, there actually is an alternative method. You can use an action recorder set to possession mode. I don't extremely like using the action recorder, but if you want to, you can. For this particular thing, I prefer the possession recorder. But all you gotta do is record the movement and whatever buttons are hooked up, you know, to pull off the moves and the behaviors. Now you can set it to loop, in which case he'll perfectly perform this. However, he will jump back in position. But if you set it to travel and to keep changes, he'll actually move his position and do it from this new point in time. You can also set it to play once, or to sustain. On a timeline, it'll pretty much work, you know, normally. You can just loop the timeline, and if you set it to sustain, you'll essentially achieve the same thing as if you looped it. And it looks like this. This gives you the exact length of it, in case you need to balance it out with other attacks. And you can record them together. Because I have playback delay for the moves, certain things you wouldn't be able to do right away. Like if you wanted him to go from shooting to using melee, he wouldn't be able to do that immediately because I've set these little things. You may recognize them. Not gate in the port. Using a timeline to decree how long the attack is. You know, prevents playback, but it also prevents other moves from being used, so you have to wait till the move is fully over, which means if you're placing them on the timeline, you might want to put a little space in between. There's a lot of other nuances to this system. For instance, I have a system set up so that it automatically will walk toward the player in any situation, but you don't necessarily have to have that. You could have it be stationary if you wanted to, or just record all its movements yourself. But basically, as long as it's active and the AI is on, it will automatically follow anything labeled player. You can find these settings inside the Puppet's Tweak menu. There's follow and turn towards. I'm not really using turn towards though. I'm actually using a look at rotator set to follow player. And I've got a randomizer hooked up to each of these timelines, which are set to play once. And at the end, I have a little switch just to make sure that playback, happens smoothly. It goes into this node, and that goes into a timeline with another switch on it, which just shuffles and randomizes this whole affair, making sure that the creature cycles through its various behaviors properly. However, if you want to do away with all this complicated mess, by the way, I highly suggest no repeat. It's very useful if you don't want things to get repetitive. This is pretty good if you want to create an unpredictable pattern of behavior. However, it does have drawbacks. I would say, though, a much simpler way would just to make one giant timeline and put multiple behaviors on it in a sequence. If it's long enough and there's a diverse amount of behaviors, the point at which it loops and plays back at the beginning won't be very noticeable to the player. And it will create a good, good illusion that the creature actually has, some thought process to it and isn't just a bunch of random triggers going off. There's some other things I would also mention. If you want to do away with action recorders entirely, it's actually possible to do so, as long as you have some other method of triggering these moves. I currently have it set up so that you use the controller sensor to trigger these moves. However, if you wanted to, you could have a tag hooked up, and as long as it's labeled properly, you could trigger it using a zone. I will demonstrate. Just make sure it's within the radius of the tag, which is about there, so it probably will work. And as you see, it will trigger the attack. Again, be sure to space them apart correctly. I'll demonstrate with a special as well. Now, selecting between specials, that's ordinarily what I have in there, but if you're going to have the AI do it, I would just get rid of selection altogether and have it so that it's just triggered by tags at the right moment. We'll call this Special 1. And I'm not going to show how to construct the moves, because that's kind of a separate tutorial, but mainly we're just talking about how to trigger them properly. Special 1. Alright, let's see how his behaviors would play out. Attack. I will say that this method, one of the advantages is it gives you greater control over the duration of a move. Probably more so than the action recorder. You would still probably have to record his movements using an action recorder, because I guess it's possible that you could use a mover on a timeline, but that would be somewhat more complicated, I would think, and probably better just to go the other way. Now, yeah, I'd say this is pretty simple. Another way you can do it, this is kind of the most basic way that I know of to construct AI behavior, is to basically just have it so that when you're within a certain distance, like have a trigger zone labeled to detect friend or whatever your player is labeled, when you're within a certain radius, it'll trigger a basic behavior which has all the animations and such built into it. Like you would just put all of your AI behavior on this timeline. I'll demonstrate what that would look like. This system I've got here is very complex because it's built for a specific, type of game, but if you wanted something more simple, like just a looping attack that's very basic, you could just put this on the timeline, have the trigger zone hooked up, and when something's within range, let's say this is the player, we'll have to put a tag on it to make sure it targets properly. player. And we'll also want the ports open. One moment. Here we go. I'm going to remove these wires and set it so that it goes for player. Just turn towards behavior. Very simple, easily adjustable. Alright. So he'll go over here, and when this thing is labeled friend, that will set off the timeline, triggering the basic behavior, which will loop. That's a basic attack. And you could just, you know, have a little timeline of behaviors, not very long. I think that's good for basic enemies. If you just want them to walk up and attack you, that's probably the easiest way to do it. Just put them on here. Alternatively, if you wanted to be more neat about it, you could have them inside a timeline. Like this. It's a little bit more neat. Also, if you wanted to, you could shut off these individual timelines. Like if you wanted this to loop, but you wanted it disabled, say the creature's limb got severed so it can't attack anymore in that way, you could just shut off a switch connected to the timeline and then this wouldn't play anymore, but some of the other attacks would. In case you have, you know, any ideas about that. And then when the player goes out of range, you could have a NOT gate hooked up to restart timeline so that the timeline would go back to the beginning and not just, you know, loop from where it was. It would be a real awkward situation to suddenly just clip in to the timeline playing a certain frame. Another way you can do this is if you want to prevent, you know, if you want it to loop, but also have it play through the entire animation without playing back, you can just put a switch on here and do the old, you know, node game. This thing. That way it'll play through the entire thing without any hitch. But still loop once it's ended. As long as power is being applied, it'll loop back to the beginning. I tend to prefer that particular method. I just find that setting it to normal loop is just a little bit more finicky. It doesn't have the best results. But yes, just a big long timeline with a bunch of various behaviors, and that's pretty much, you know, a boss. Setting up phases would require a different set of logic. I could actually explain that though. I would say for that you would need a selector. I would have all of the logic you intend to use on a microchip. And I would just have it, you know, microchip 1 is phase 1 of the boss's behavior. Microchip 2 is phase 2 of the boss's behavior, and then when the boss hits 0 HP, get rid of this so it won't destroy itself, or, you know, the puppet. Normally it's connected to the controller sensor, just get rid of that. And that way it won't die. Instead you could have it play a cutscene or something on the timeline, as long as you're using this input of no health. Then you could have a new health bar, or have this one reset itself and go into phase 2. Or if you wanted to have it, you know, at halfway health, like in a FromSoft game, he decides to go into a new behavior at halfway health, just have it set so that your health, current health, goes into a calculator and will go less than 50%. So after he's below 50% health, it'll automatically trigger the next phase, you know, just connect it to the B output, and so on and so on. But hopefully you found that helpful. I would like to go into more about how to construct, you know, all these different movesets and other things, but that's a completely different story, so At least you know the basics, though. Very rudimentary stuff. Hopefully you'll be cooking up a good little AI in the oven. That's all.
Here are the names of all of our lovely cult supporters. Many thanks to all of you. If you'd like to get your name in those credits, check the link in the description and head over to our coffee. You can become a cultist neophyte to become credited at the end of our video, or you can become an acolyte to gain early access to videos in addition to credit. Now, if you aren't in the mood for membership, you can always leave a one-time tip. If you enjoyed this video and are not already subscribed, consider hitting the subscribe button down below. And maybe give us a quick like, both options are free. Also, don't forget to ring the notification bell so you will always be notified when new videos come out. If you have any thoughts, questions, or suggestions, leave them in the comment section. Or if you just want to let out your pent-up rage, give us some smack talk. Until next time, goodbye.